a brand new wave, drowning out the noise that's tame. Liberty whispers through the brave, breaking free from every chain. Nullify the rules they crave, crypto beats that pave the way. Anarchy with minds that's safe, algorithms put on the day. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride. Beyond control we take a stand, casting off the iron brand. Freedom flowing through our hands, revolution's our command. Decentralize the way we plan, all together we expand. Breaking shackles for the clan, in this journey we're on pan. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride.
I am the legacy of Jennifer Kaiser. Welcome to Legacy News, episode 52. We're doing things a little bit different. This isn't Monday. This is Tuesday. You missed us. If you thought you missed us on Monday, we're no longer doing Mondays. Start your week off with the Legacy News on Tuesday, and finish off on Wednesday. Give you a little break from us. Give us a little break too, because we're so doggone busy. I mean, we got our own day jobs, night jobs, if you talk about Andrew. We got podcast slew all throughout the week. So don't think that we forgot you. Monday, come on the YouTube. If you want to get a little hint to the taste of Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I assure you the little taste is there with a little bit of some shorts all across our YouTube page. So don't forget to check out the shorts, give a like, and get ready for Tuesdays from here on out. But with that, let's get into the show. Welcome in, Andrew Joseph.
Welcome into the legacy ride.
Shut up. Stop it.
Sorry.
Stop it. Who sings that song?
Okay. I don't know, but I'm not.
Get your ass in here. But anyways, let's just keep it that way. All right.
Okay.
Let's keep it that way. You're not a singer. You were never a singer. Please don't sing.
I'm
I try not to sing. Yeah. Don't quit your night job. But this is Legacy News. We're going to jump into a topic that's very hot as of recently. There are significant protests across the country this weekend, by the way. I don't know if it has anything to do with the tariffs. I think it has more to do with those, but still, it's quite significant that these paid actors with their paid organizers, we all know it's all paid. It's all a narrative. It's all a work. Started on Saturday. Yeah, I believe it was themed, but it was for Saturday. It was a big old slew of protests all across the country. I saw one clip where it was either a clip or a picture. It was just a big old crowd in like Boston. I know Washington's has theirs. So basically every major city that's predominantly liberal is protesting against Trump. And it coincides with the tariff debacle that has that has gone in effect since the day after April Fool's Day. What did Trump call it?
I believe the term is Liberation Day, but I also believe the
Liberation
term
from
that you're looking for is counterfactual. These are counterfactual protests. Less
the
than those
protests are
activists.
counterfactual. I think it's all counterfactual because I think both sides just want to destroy the prosperity of a world order that we've experienced through most of our lives. I mean, obviously, we can go even further and say that the prosperous movement is on its downward spiral because I mean it's kind of hard when there's one monetary supply and there's a slew of bankers that own your capital and you have socialism for the rich, capitalism, rather than free market economics, laissez-faire. Or as Mises, all right, libertarians, or as Mises would have attained, laissez-faire capitalism. Okay, I understand that. Who cares? It's still not capitalism.
Look at me. I'm the retard now.
So what is your book? I have a video for us to watch. It's quite we're not gonna play through the whole of it. I think it's very interesting on this guy's take. What is Trump's plan? And we'll answer this question after the video. Is Trump stoking chaos for a better world order? That's the
I was
question.
actually thinking about that this weekend, but we'll go into that later.
We will go into it later. Should we go ahead and start this video, get it underway, and talk about it after we're done?
Sure.
I am not going to play the intro.
To answer that question, first a bit about Trump's new economic team. First, we have Scott Bessent, the new Treasury Secretary, an ultra-wealthy hedge fund manager that famously worked with George Soros himself to break the Bank of England in the early 90s. And he used to teach economic history classes at Yale. Then there's Stephen Moran, Trump's new top economic advisor.
Hold on. Did he just say that Bessent worked with George Soros in the 90s?
I believe he did.
All right, let's get in.
One single mortal threat to the United States: deindustrialization. So, of course, they were drawn to Donald Trump's campaign with its goal of
make the United States into a manufacturing powerhouse like it used to be many years ago.
Many years ago, indeed. If we look at this chart, we can see that in the 1950s, the US used to be a manufacturing powerhouse, and manufacturing value added accounted for 28% of output. Today, that number is only 10%. Trump's first trade war did not significantly change that trajectory, though. But why is this such a big problem? America's economy is bigger than ever, right? Why does the Trump team care so much about industry? Two reasons. First, deindustrialization has devastated America's industrial heartland, which overwhelmingly voted Trump in 2024. Second, US industrial power is now far behind that of other comparable powers, especially China, putting it at a massive disadvantage in case of a war, given that historically civilian factories and know-how have been essential for rapid militarization. So the Trump team thinks a lot about China. What happens if they invade Taiwan? Yes, the US has a stronger fleet for now, but as Vice President J.D. Vance has noted, US deindustrialization has gotten so bad that
one of Beijing's state-owned firms built more commercial ships just last year than all of America has produced since the end of World War II.
So I think in that light, that, yeah, it does make sense that the Trump administration wants to reindustrialize the US. But does he really have to slap tariffs on everyone at the same time? And say stuff like this about his closest allies?
Taking our jobs, taking our wealth, taking a lot of things that they've been taking over the years. They've taken so much out of our country, friend and foe. And frankly, friend has been oftentimes much worse than foe.
After all, the US has been the most powerful country on earth for decades. It literally designed the current trading system. So why is it so unhappy about it?
It
To answer
did.
that question, we need to go through the entire period of this graph. A brief history of the US-led global order. After all, the deindustrialization of the US is a long historical trend, and it happened under two specific global orders, both made by the US itself. The first is the Bretton Woods system from 1944 to 1973. The second is the neoliberal world order that arguably lasted from Reagan's presidency in the early 80s to Trump's first term in 2016. The periods in between are, in my view, adjustment periods. So, okay, let's start with the Bretton Woods system and why it is crucial to understand Trump's plan today. The Bretton Woods system was established in the 1940s. On the economic side, the rules were laid out in 1944 when the United Nations Monetary and
Is that a
Financial Conference
pedophile?
was held in Bretton Woods
Yes,
in the
that's a
United States.
pedophile.
Meanwhile, on the security side, several conferences were signed that ultimately led to the creation of NATO and the US-Japan Security Treaty. Together, I'm going to refer to this all as the Bretton Woods Economic and Security Order. Joining this order for any country other than the United States meant the following three things. One, you would fix the value of your currency to the US dollar, which itself was tied to gold. Two, you would rely on the US for military protection, potentially even hosting US military bases. And three, the US would help your industries become competitive against their own by providing Marshall Plan 8 and by opening up its own market while allowing its recovering allies to shield their markets to a certain extent from US companies. Notably, getting back to Besant's green, yellow, and red buckets, only allies would receive these benefits. Neutral countries did not get them, but they could sign individual deals, while communist countries were essentially shut out of the Bretton Woods economic order. The history of the Bretton Woods system is really crucial because already here it seems like being a green country looks like a super good deal for these countries and not for the US. But I think that is misguided for at least three reasons. First, the US was really wary of creating another world war, and while it gave Europe and Japan an advantage in market access, in return it got really good allies that it really needed in its global fight against communism. Second, US industries also needed export markets themselves. By making its allies rich, the US allowed itself to get richer as well. Finally, this system really cemented the role of the US dollar as the global reserve currency. Issuing the world's reserve currency came with what French Finance Minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing called an exorbitant privilege. This privilege meant that because the demand for US dollars as a reserve currency was so great, it allowed the US to spend much more internationally than it earned without facing a currency crisis. However, arguably, giving Japan and Europe key market access did already contribute a little bit to deindustrialization. However, as Stephen Moran writes in his paper, this system inevitably led to a dilemma for the US, the so-called Triffin dilemma. You see, as the global economy grew, the need for dollars increased, but the quantity of gold was relatively stable. So to keep the global economy growing, the US either needed to choose to keep creating more dollars, making the gold standard less and less credible, or to keep the gold standard and kill global economic growth by stopping the creation of new dollars that the world needed. This ultimately led to the following iconic announcement by President Nixon in 1971.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets,
which was then followed by a period of global economic turmoil, after which the neoliberal world order was ushered in by Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. This neoliberal world order was characterized by, number one, lower tariffs, number two, lower barriers on investment around the world, number three, flexible exchange rates, and number four, the US guaranteeing security for everyone that at least played somewhat nice with the United States. In line with its free market principles, the neoliberal order was far less structured than the Bretton Woods order. There was no formal agreement now in which countries promised to use US dollars. They just did so because it was the most convenient and most reliable currency out there. However, in this system, any non-US nation had a very strong incentive to hoard US dollars by making it easy to export to the US and making it harder to import from the US. Notably, despite praising the virtues of free trade, the World Trade Organization did actually allow developing nations to have higher tariffs against the US than the other way around, precisely because the US hoped that by making the world richer, it would become friendlier, just as has happened before with Germany and Japan. Compared to Bretton Woods, the number of green countries, so to say, got much bigger in the neoliberal order. As long as you were willing to play by the rules of the World Trade Organization, you got good access to the massive US consumer market, the US dollar banking system, and as a bonus, US Navy protection of global shipping. That sure sounds like a pretty good deal. But of course, the US again got something very, very big in return for it. With the fixed exchange rates of Bretton Woods gone, Stephen Miran writes that reserve demand for American assets pushed up the dollar, leading it to levels far in excess of what would balance international trade over the long run. So, thanks to flexible exchange rates, the US's exorbitant privilege arguably became even stronger. A strong dollar meant that the US could keep its massive military all over the world, despite becoming a far smaller economy relative to the rest of the world and relative to its dominance in the 50s. On top of that, the strong dollar made Americans in general much richer than they would otherwise have been. However, on the flip side, it did make manufacturing in the US much more expensive, causing stable manufacturing jobs to leave the country, especially when China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001 in something that became known as the China shock. Meanwhile, a strong dollar mostly helped those Americans that already had a lot of dollars, thereby making inequality worse. Then, in 2016, increased inequality in a devastated industrial heartland helped to elect Donald Trump, who started his first trade war in 2016. In hindsight, I believe this already marked the end of the neoliberal world order because it ended the very neoliberal idea that free trade is always good. This trade war was mostly about raising tariffs against China. However, China always retaliated, meaning that at the end of it, China still had a higher average tariff rate on the US than the other way around. Notably, this did not stop deindustrialization of the US. It also did not stop the rise of China's mighty manufacturing industries, which are now threatening to upend the entire car industry. So Biden tried something new. He tried subsidizing US industries on a massive scale, just as the Chinese had done before him. This led to a lot of new factories being built in the US. However, according to Bessent and Miran, this was not sustainable, leading to a very high US government deficit. So here we are today, transitioning further and further away from the neoliberal order, an order that the US itself created under Reagan, an order which kept the US the richest and most powerful nation on earth by inflating the value of the dollar. But according to Trump's team, it led to such rapid deindustrialization that it has now become a national security threat. Which brings us to the MAGA master plan for a new global order. A plan that is supposed to help reindustrialize the US while at the same time to keep the US dollar as the global reserve currency, because as Trump himself has said,
And if you want to go to third world status, lose your reserve currency. We have to have that. We cannot lose it.
So how do you keep your reserve currency status and reindustrialize at the same time? Most economists think that this is simply not possible. But Stephen Miran, he published a paper that says, yeah, this is actually possible. You can have your cake and eat it too. But to be clear, the paper that Miran has written is not a plan in itself. It is a cookbook with options. At the time of recording, Bessent also has not presented a full plan that includes his green, yellow, and red country structure. So, for the three-step MAGA master plan that I am about to present you, I had to dive deep into what both Miran and Bessent have revealed so far. And no, sadly, I was not added to a US government signal group by accident. So for each step, I'll tell you exactly where I got my information from. Okay, here we go. Step 1, tariff chaos. This is the step that we are in now. In this step, the administration shows that it means business. It no longer cares about the stock market crashing. It no longer cares about the economy temporarily doing poorly. It just applies a lot of high tariffs to foes and friends alike to create negotiating leverage. I'm basing this on the fact that Besant has said that while he didn't initially view tariffs as a negotiating tool, Mr. Trump,
he's added the third leg to the stool and he uses it for negotiating.
my second piece of evidence to suggest the current chaos is temporary is that before being part of the administration, Miran said that the dollar policies that he proposed would likely be
pursued later in an administration after tariffs had produced the sufficient negotiating leverage.
So both Miran and Besant are essentially telling us that the current tariff chaos is just about creating leverage that can be used when implementing the rest of the plan. Which brings us to step number 2, reciprocal tariffs. Remember this graph where China reacted to Trump's tariffs by ever increasing its own tariffs? If you really have reciprocal tariffs, that dynamic is theoretically gone. It will just be, look, you can keep going up, but we'll always match you, so there's always a level playing field. This is the long-term goal of the tariffs, or in Besant's words,
This is what tariffs are designed to address. Leveling the playing field such that the international trading system begins to reward ingenuity, security, rule of law, and stability, not wage suppression, currency manipulation, intellectual property theft, non-tariff barriers, and draconian regulation.
But here economists have often criticized the administration for wishful thinking because historically trade wars, such as those in the 1930s, just made everyone worse off and led to war. But here Miran has said that
They've only got the United States to sell to. There's no alternative. So they're the ones who will bear the burden of these tariffs.
this is a really tricky point to understand, but what he essentially means is that due to everyone wanting to export to the US to obtain dollars, the US has a truly unique negotiating position in a trade war. Trump's first trade war failed because China just increased exporting to countries like Mexico and Vietnam, which then exported to the US. So by extending tariffs to all countries, Miran writes that President Trump views tariffs as generating negotiating leverage for making deals. It is easier to imagine that after a series of punitive tariffs, trading partners like Europe and China become more receptive to some manner of currency accord in exchange for a reduction of tariffs. A currency accord, that's right. This brings us to the final step in the MAGA master plan. Step 3, a Mar-a-Lago Accord. Yes, a Mar-a-Lago Accord that will go into the history books to rival the 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement or 1985 Plaza Accord, in which Japan and the US and European countries came together to collectively raise the values of the yen and European currencies versus the dollar. But how does that relate to Besant's green, yellow, and red buckets? After joining the Trump administration, Miran has gotten much more quiet about this Mar-a-Lago Accord, which makes sense because he doesn't want to give away too much. But still, he did tell us that
If the dollar were able to weaken to equilibrate trade, then we wouldn't have a lot of the, to balance trade deficits, then we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that tariffs and other policies are designed to address, because U.S. exports would be more competitive on the global stage and we wouldn't be as cheated by other countries.
So I suspect that to avoid ruining the negotiations, they cannot talk about this as freely anymore as before, but that the ultimate goal is still to weaken the dollar while keeping it as a reserve currency. In his paper, Miran talked about some wacky options that the US could use to do this on its own, such as charging reserve currency users a user fee, but I think that they will not go for these options because it will be far too risky. Instead, I think the Mar-a-Lago Accord that the Trump team ultimately will push will look a lot like the Bretton Woods system, just minus the link to gold. I could even imagine that in this new world order, green countries peg their currencies to the dollar with a deal that whenever the dollar gets too strong, they appreciate their currencies against it. In return, they get access to the largest consumer market in the world, as well as security benefits and good access to the US dollar system. But unlike in Bretton Woods, I expect the US wants countries to pay tribute for that security, making them essentially vassal states. Yes, this is speculative from my side, but listen to this recent speech by Besant and please tell me if you hear the elements that I just talked about.
The international trading system consists of a web of relationships, military, economic, political. One cannot take a single aspect in isolation. This is how President Trump sees the world, not as a zero-sum game, but as interlinkages that can be reordered to advance the interest of the American people.
And this is why I think Trump's current economic chaos makes sense. The Trump team believes that the current international order is no longer in the best interest of the American people. They have already told us that the current tariff chaos is just a means to create negotiating leverage. They've already told us that they aim to use reciprocal tariffs to even the playing field for red and yellow countries, and they have hinted that if a currency deal can be made, tariffs can be much lower. And yeah, I do believe that if enough countries join the new MAGA world order as green countries that peg their currency to the US dollar, this does indeed mean that Trump can have his weaker dollar while maintaining its status as a reserve currency. This could help reindustrialize the US, at least to a certain extent in theory. But of course, all of this depends on the US making it attractive enough for countries to become a green country in the new MAGA international order. This, I believe, is the real problem with the plans of people like Besant and Miran. They're clearly smart people, they have studied history extensively, but to voluntarily commit to raising your currency's value compared to the dollar, to continue to rely on US military protection, but now to pay for it, that essentially makes you a vassal state, subordinate to a great power. To submit yourself to the US in such a way, that requires an enormous amount of trust. Trust that the US had plenty of when countries signed the Bretton Woods Agreement, or when they went along with Reagan's Plaza Accord in 1985. But if you tear up a trade agreement that you yourself signed, like the one with Canada and Mexico, or if you threaten to annex your closest ally or the territory controlled by one of your most loyal European allies, then how can you expect countries to ever want to join your new MAGA economic and security order? And if no one actually joins your new economic order, then you do have to choose. Either you give up your reserve currency status and the wealth and power that comes with it, or you keep the dollar and its power and accept that you need to rely on Mexican, European, and Japanese manufacturing capabilities. But yeah, that is my take. Obviously, there's much more to talk about.
The big picture.
What do you, the big picture. The big picture.
Believe me.
Believe me,
Man.
we are going to make America great again. We're going to be the top dog. Okay, the top dog. Just think of the big picture. Well, the big picture there, Donnie, is there's no fallacy when I look into history, and one of the biggest negative effects towards the lead up of the Great Depression was tariffs. But that also correlated with what was initially passed in 1913, the 17th Amendment, the tax on income, which wasn't to the grander stage that it is today. Obviously, they had to reformulate and revigorate it onto the standard of what they initially brought it in on, which was the same narrative that we're hearing today. We're going to tax the rich.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think? What do you think about this video? This guy's take on the ordeal of this tariff order.
And like I said, it kind of plays into what I was thinking about this weekend. Is it's not directly related, but it's semi-related, right? I was thinking, this whole last 8 years, and then the next 3.5 years, or whatever you want to call it, for Trump's presidency. What happens if it was all structured in a way for it to work out this way? Like when he came in, he started pushing China, yeah, and then he was gaslighting China, and then oh my God, we got COVID. We're not supposed to say that on YouTube. Sorry. And then Joe Biden's in, and oh man, we're gonna give it. And now we got this bullshit with China now, and he's playing
the thing about, I'm going to stop you right there. Joe Biden was just as hard on the China aspect as well. The only difference was, and he's exactly right, he began the subsidy. That's exactly what the infrastructure bill was. That his what was it? The Inflation Reduction Bill. It was a subsidy premise in order to prop up. They played into the hands of the international community, but
they played into the thought that we can control Joe Biden. So they thought, he's not as difficult to deal with as Trump, so we can relax and take it a little easy. Meanwhile, their banking system's capitulating, and they're robbing crypto exchanges and stuff like that over there covertly.
They
have to try to maintain their stability. And then Trump comes in, and he's like, oh well, now we're gonna have. And you see they're buckling a little bit because they had that tweet like, if he wants war, he's gonna have war. I don't have the tweet up, but it was like an official like Twitter or X account from the Chinese state party.
Well, that also ties in line with the war rhetoric right now with the American system and why we're so heavily involved with Israel and the Middle East, and why the talking point is Iran, and why we are beginning our crusade against the Houthis in Yemen, one of Iran's largest funding factors to keep their mediation within their regional control, because you have the Middle East is very unique. You have the Saudis in the middle, and then you have Iran, and then you have Israel, right? So we're having these war type scenario talking points, effectively causing more proxy war involvement and potential direct war involvement, and then you're having this escalation of trade wars with high tariffs, high reciprocal tariffs, proclaiming that we are reciprocating what other nations are effectively doing, which is true to a certain extent, but false.
Just remember, he's a TV guy. So
he is
anything that you're seeing that he's playing into the. I mean, I'm not saying the conspiracy or anything. I'm just saying, oh my God, it's is this real? Is this fake? Find out later on in the season finale.
Well, let's refer to what the Mar-a-Lago Accords are. Is it effectively the idea of the Trump administration to strengthen the dollar through control of protectionist policies by keeping it weak? Is that that sounds like the plan of the Mar-a-Lago Accords, is to weaken the dollar so much, but at the same time, in a parallel form, reciprocating it to other currencies and tagging other nations in the enforcement of vassal state status if they want to continue relations with the United States.
Well, look what happened with the thing with he was talking about him trying to take over what was it, Greenland or whatever, Iceland. I don't know. I just work here, but the thing is that he's trying to compete with Russia, right, for territory, for control to meet up to their physical size and land.
Well, that actually kind of puts a spin on the last 4 years now of the Russian-Ukraine debacle and why Russia may have actually invaded. There's other policies, there's other conundrum within that. Ukraine is not a good place. It's a den of corruption, but so is Russia and its oligarchy, and so is the United States for that matter. But it sounds like perhaps maybe that is why Russia felt it was time in February 2022 to invade Ukraine, to expand territory westward so that they can contain their influence and also control the breadbasket fully within Europe. And the United States is taking Trump with his rhetoric, specifically with like Greenland, is taking that to another step in competition, because Greenland is enmeshed with so much gas and oil reserves that has been untapped, that perhaps if we can seed some sort of annexation agreement with Denmark, some type of treaty that gives the United States more control over Greenland, even if it's not a full annexation, that gives an easier access to untapped resources, sort of similar to how Russia might be actually playing their cards with Ukraine.
I'll touch the conspiracy theorists say it was a legitimate thing to be concerned about.
What's a legitimate thing to be concerned about?
All this. That it really
It's
matters.
always I think it's still very concerning, only for the fact that you have nuclear powers that are now at odds with one another: Russia, the United States, Britain, France, you name it, Israel, Iran, and let's not sugarcoat it. Iran is nuclear capable. I mean,
They
who
are.
knows if they're weapon capable, if they're weapon ready, but they are definitely nuclear capable. We don't know exactly what's been going on with their nuclear research program over there. It could be that they're trying to revitalize themselves and innovate into nuclear energy, like they say they are doing, and why they're trying to get into the nuclear age. Or it could be, and this is my personal opinion, and it rightfully so, because you want to checkmate. Oh, you attack me? Well, we're okay. We have nukes, so it
Well,
could
I
be a
mean,
checkmate scenario.
the USSR, right? They disbanded, but their government still exists. They just retracted into Russia. So there's still an element of that mindset that's still at play, and they're playing with different players. And the more
you mean like
loosely,
Putin being a KGB? Many of the Soviet, old Soviet Bolshevik, the Communist Party. These are your oligarchs that basically control the government in Russia. They're Soviets. They've just become
the party was banned, but that doesn't mean the spirit isn't.
Yeah,
you can't kill an idea, right? No matter what.
You can't.
So that's something to always keep in mind, that maybe this is just the old war games, just for old time's sake.
So to answer the question, rolling at the bottom, is Trump stoking the chaos for a better world order? Is this the great reset that the neoliberal order did not want, or is this just the same shit, different scenario?
I think it's definitely he's stoking it for a better world order, but you don't want world order, because that's just sadism. It's a centralized control. I thought from our perspective, at least from my perspective, the less interference in government operations in general, the better.
Well, from my perspective, I think that states, just like individuals, are very agorist in nature, and they counter each other. And they counter each other with trade. They counter each other economically. They counter each other innovatively. And I think if we allow for that human ingenuity from individual to even nation state, you can actually shrink it down. So allow everybody to. I would much rather have 200,000 Liechtensteins countering each other economically, nationally, not even military. You wouldn't even have to go the military route, because you'd have an economic status, right? I said status like a Brit. You'd have an economic clash to eradicate statism, because you'd have a domino effect of each nation countering each other economically and competing to cooperate. And I don't think the tariff scenario is any good. We know it's not good. There are some elements of it that certainly are good if we didn't have a fucking income tax. Say you reciprocate with certain protections to keep certain industry within a country as it rapidly advances and expands, like the United States in the latter half of the 19th century. But for the most part, I mean, the progressives of the Republican Party in 1860 still won.
Are you implying that there's competition between the old bloc and the new bloc?
I am implying that there are competition between the old bloc and the new bloc. So,
new blood, old rules.
Like you say many times on all of our episodes that we're on, whether it's Legacy News, whether it's World Blockchain Roundtable, whether it's the Legacy Right, and just personally between us behind the scenes, it's like the white and the red army colliding. And I don't know where Trump stands. It could be that this MAGA line is the red army, but it could be that his line is the white army, and that the neoliberal order is the red army. But we don't necessarily know who is who. What is the white army? Yeah. So what is the white army? Who is the white army? Who is the red army? Nobody is to know, and it is not very good for the world.
No.
Because it's the same shit, different scenario.
Unfortunately, that's the truth.
So with that, anything else to say on this order?
No, we're going to be a part of the audience just like everybody else. So let's see what happens.
And as Aaron Day tweeted out yesterday, I don't have the tweet on me right now, but there's a way to beat these tariffs, everybody. P2P cash transaction. Get the fuck out of their system and stop using their fucking money.
Right?
I improvised his tweet.
Just a little.
That's what I heard in my voice. Yeah. In his voice in my head, using my words.
He admits it, ladies and gentlemen. He's hearing voices in his head.
I'm hearing voices in my head. They counsel me. They talk to me. They counsel me.
Okay, RKO. Hey!
There's nothing you can say. And with that,
copyright.
I see the exit over there. Andrew, go talk to that nice man and see if he can lead us to the exit. And we'll be back on Wednesday, everybody, for a next edition of Breaking Monero.
Hey, sir. Yes, over there.
I'm going to have to leave now, but I was sure I came in by that door over there. Hey, man, where's the door to get out of here?
Oh, it's right over there, sir.
Right over where?
The exit sign? Exit sign? It's that door right there.
That red sign?
Yeah, just go right that way.
Okay.
I think it went down the wrong door.
Where am I? Hey, what the fuck's wrong with you? That's not the right door.
Sir, you're gonna want to go to the one with the exit. You went to the door to the side there.
I went to the right doors of where you pointed me to, you fuck.
I pointed you to the exit.
Man, you're fucking with the wrong guy.
I'm sorry.
You see this bulge on my hip? You know what that is?
That's a gun.
That's a Glock. You're fucking with the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Don't ever